Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the PAC ProAM presentation of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth, brought to you in partnership with Kinetic by Windstream, the Cabero Group, German American Bank, Alan L. Thomas Piano Tuning and Repair, Chris and Peggy Ryan for Ray and Ethel, Kenneth and Nanette Johnston, Jimmy D. and Nelson Kelly, Jerry Cormier, the Lisk family, and Kimberly Strange. And please welcome, joining me tonight, Mr. Alan Thomas. Alan Thomas, piano repair and tuning. He has been, how long have you been tuning our grand now?
Don't know, at least 5 or 6 years.
That's what I was thinking, yeah. Even through the pandemic, he was coming and making sure we were okay. Yeah. Alan, how did you get into tuning and piano and repair and all of that?
Well, I took piano lessons for years as a child, and when I was about 9th grade in high school, freshman in high school, I saw an ad in Sheet Music magazine that said anyone can learn how to tune, and I thought, oh, that'd be an interesting hobby.
And here we are.
And here we are. 40 years later.
Oh, my, 40 years. That's wonderful. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank
you. Now, in addition to donating your time and talents to the PAC as a piano tuner, that's your donated time and talent is what makes you a partner for this. We thank you for that. You are seeing the show for the second time.
Yes.
So what would you want to share with them to prepare them for what they're about to see this evening?
Keep your eyes open, your ears open, and your brain in gear.
All right. Thank you. That sounds like a piano tuner to me. Yeah, thank you very much. Alan Thomas, everyone. If you would like to join Alan and our other PAC partners, please speak to one of our staff or volunteers before you leave. Now, in addition to the support of partners like Alan, as well as patrons like yourself, we want to thank today's cast and crew of 33 participants. They include 20 adults, 12 students, 8 professionals, 24 amateurs, and 15 of our participants are representing Hardin County Schools, either staff or students. If you'll welcome them to tonight's performance as well. Today's program includes long-forgotten literary quotations and historical references that most of you will not recall. Today's program includes depictions of humanity at its best, at its worst, and at its most absurd. So, let's tune in now to the Antrobus family and their maid, Sabina, and binge watch mankind's favorite TV sitcom, The Skin of Our Teeth.
If the time goes from hot to cold, I'll keep you warm as we grow old. Me and you will get through by the skin of our teeth. Yeah, me and you will get through by the skin of our teeth.
The Skin of Our Teeth is filmed before a live theater audience. Oh, 6 o'clock and Mr. A not home yet? Pray God nothing serious has happened to him. Here it is, the middle of August and the coldest day of the year. Why, it's so cold the dogs are sticking to the sidewalks.
Tell us your name and what you do and what you did in the show.
My name is Allison Levins. I do costume design for some of our PAC shows, and I was also in the ensemble of the cast for Skin of Our Teeth.
Tell us about the characters you played in the play.
Being in the ensemble for this show was fun because you kind of got to be a lot of nameless people who just went around doing wacky things with the rest of the ensemble. And then there was a moment where a few of us got to play ourselves as stage managers or as, actors. So I was playing myself as the costumer who didn't really want to be on stage, which was easy to do.
Doing costumes for this show, how did it differ from other projects you've worked on?
It was really nice and a little bit cathartic to do a show that was mainly based in modern attire. You know, our first act was in the 90s, our second was in the mid-2000s, and then our third kind of took place modern day or within a few
Postmodern,
years,
yeah.
postmodern. So growing up in the 90s, it was fun to kind of pull things like, I remember my mom wearing this, I remember wearing this as a kid, and I just come from working on a film that was also set in the 90s, so I'd been doing like a month of just like kind of side research, watching how we were dressing people for that, to say like, okay, I can get those pants, I can take that kind of t-shirt, and that was fun.
What was the most difficult part of the show for you, for the production?
There were a few physical difficulties that you kind of run into with anything, running up and down stairs, running, and you know, we all kind of just pulled shoes, whether they super fit or not. It was like, well, they're here, I'll wear them, but overall, balancing costuming people and learning the tracks and just being on top of all of that. It had been a while since I'd done any performing, and most of what I had done was more either improv-based or character performer, where we didn't have a script. So I like having a script, but keeping up with the rest of the cast who were very familiar with that type of work and not wanting to fall behind them, and keeping up with making sure we had all the costumes we needed and doing alterations in between rehearsals.
What was the most rewarding part of the experience for you?
It was really fun to get to perform on stage again, to follow a track and to know exactly what you're doing when. I got to do a little bit of that during Beauty and the Beast, and I really enjoy it. I enjoyed being invisible in that show because I was in a blackout suit the whole time. It's like a game, going through and hitting the right beats at the right time and knowing here's when the music starts and here's the beat of the music where you do that. That is a lot of fun for me to do, more than actually being seen or the performing part of it. The technical parts of doing something in theater, it was fun to get to do that, and rewarding with, you know, by the time we got through rehearsals, I knew all my words, and that was a little milestone.
You know, thinking about how we were looking at the show 6 months ago or a year ago, anything that you didn't anticipate, anything that you were surprised about in the final product?
I think what surprised me and what I had anticipated, because studying the script and planning out the costumes, you tend to get a very concrete idea in your head of who each character is, and a lot of our actors in wonderful ways brought something entirely different to the table, and it didn't necessarily affect how the costumes looked as much as how they were worn, if that makes sense. And I enjoyed that. I didn't expect Emily's characterization of Gladys was much more interesting to me than what was in the script. And I really enjoyed how she puts a lot of herself into a character while also acting phenomenally well and bringing a really real emotion to a scene that you know she may not be feeling in real life, but it's very, very genuine. And even though it wasn't the Gladys that I had read in the script, I liked it a lot more than what I had read. And we went back and forth together with costumes a little bit and had a lot of fun. Not so much arguing, just as she found pieces that she wanted to add to things. I was like, that looks 100 times better than what I had been planning.
All of the elements of theater are in service of telling the story or expressing the character. And that includes costuming. And I don't think people think of costuming as a way of telling the story. But it truly is. Like, let's kind of go through the characters just a little bit, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. So, like, when costuming Mrs. Antrobus, what were you doing with that costume to express that character?
Moira and I didn't have a conversation about how she was dressed until she had already been to a few more rehearsals than I had been through. And in her mind, that beginning scene was set in the 1950s, where we had already established that we wanted to do it in the 90s. We were referencing 90s sitcoms, and and this is where I have to be careful not to decide who a character is before they do, that her character, Mrs. Antrobus, was she held the house together, she did all the work, she raised the children. She was really the one wearing the pants in that household. Whereas, you have Sabina going around in a dress. She's not good at being a maid, so she's not dressed for the job. She's there not to do disservice to that character, but at that moment in the show, she's meant to look pretty without really being helpful as a maid. She lets the fire go out.
Yeah.
So I had thought, well, my mom was a woman who wore pants and worked and yard work and cleaning and all of that. So that's what I had in mind for Moira, whereas Moira thought it would be dressed like a 1950s housewife. So when we got to Act 2 and she's there as kind of an accessory to her husband at a political convention and a little bit, one notch down in equality from him, that's when we put her in a dress to kind of show, she looked beautiful in it and very much like a first lady, I hope. But we had been talking about Hillary Clinton and the pantsuit, and I was like, no, I really want her to be the worker and the practical one in the household. And not that you can't do those things in a skirt, but visually it kind of established that, mom jeans, sneakers, practicality side of her that was balanced out by the very refined feminine aspect that she brought to Act 2.
And Act 3?
In Act 3, she was back in pants and pockets, and they were in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. The character Mystery Anthropus.
I pulled a lot of his costumes from what my dad wore in the 90s, which was goofy T-shirts or quirky neckties. He and I really talked through and went through a lot of different iterations of what he wore for Act 3, which is kind of a futuristic military.
As a retired military person, he had things in
yes.
his wardrobe that could be reaccessed and used.
But didn't necessarily set him so far apart from how Jay was dressed as kind of a revolutionary, guerrilla warfare type of soldier. It needed to look like anarchy versus world order.
Establishment, yeah.
And thinking when it was more in the future, what we had originally planned, I wanted it to look like Star Trek. And then we got to a point really early on where we're like, Star Trek's not really going to work in the context of this, because then what do you put this person in? What do you put that person in? And how does that all start to clash against each other on stage?
And the kids?
And the kids were so much fun to dress.
Because that was you.
Act.
That was you in those eras. Yeah.
A little bit.
You and your brother or whatever. Yeah.
I got to use the Pee Wee Herman T-shirt that I grew up with. It was my parents' T-shirt. I got to put that on Jay, which was really fun. And Emily and I had, the kids grow up through the show, so having to kind of age them through costumes and hold to their personalities while doing these big costume changes. Some of it was very last minute. Okay, we found this. Does this work? We're good. But
well, and I know there were some practicality things like Emily's skirt.
Yes.
That specifically has to be picked up
in
and
the
raised and played
script, it
with.
has to be raised and played with, and trying to give her something that wasn't a 1950s style. It had to fit the eras, but it also had to physically be able to do, and she had to be able to do a couple of fast, quick changes.
Mm-hmm. And how did you express the anarchy of the son through costuming?
In Act 1, he was still a very little boy in that act, being dressed like his mother. And I think he brought more of that to the physicality of how he played that role than the costumes necessarily did. He still had to have...
Because I really feel like you really expressed that well in Act 1.
We found a really wacky pair of pants for him, one of those 90s color... Well, it's meant to be from the 90s. It was made in modern day, so I can't say it was that period accurate. But making sure he had cargo pants to hold a slingshot in, and just crazy
colors,
and
yeah.
a lot of discord on him, which also with the Pee Wee Herman shirt, if people are familiar with it, is just like crazy all over the place, but fun and, interesting to watch. But then as, we got into Act 2 and Jay and I kept looking at My Chemical Romance music videos, and we got kind of somewhere between punk rock and SpongeBob SquarePants because it still had to look like his mother dressed him. But as that act went on, he would take off his tie or untuck his shirt or do things that kind of made him look more and more disheveled throughout the act. And then Act 3 for him, we've been lucky to get a lot of donations of like old military equipment. So we had a gas mask and we had a helmet that he was able to identify because he's very knowledgeable about World War I and II military uniforms, as was Mickey, another member of our cast. So it was like, and Brian, who has been in the military. So I had a variety of people to go to and be like, what is this? And can I use it on stage? And I don't want to be disrespectful to that piece of clothing as a part of military uniform, but it does have to be a costume. And that's something that you always try to consider when you're costuming things, is what part of whose culture are we taking this from, and at what point are we dishonoring it?
And then Sabina, which I know was a lot of fun to costume, and that you and Grace were sharing pictures back and forth, Pinterest and so forth. What were some of your influences on that?
At first, I really wanted to pull in something. It was always about her being anachronistic and kind of out of place in time wherever she was, because her character as an actress was constantly railing against the show itself and saying, I don't even want to be here, I don't even like this. Whereas the character Sabina was also always like, well, I'm above this. I don't want to be here. I've moved beyond.
I'm leaving.
And her butting heads with Mrs. Antrobus. So it was about making her look a little bit impractical wherever she was, but trying to be campy. And what Grace and I eventually settled on was very Betty Page inspired looks for Act 1 and 2. In Act 3, I pulled something from Dragon Ball Z cartoon that I thought was, because it was kind of this post-apocalyptic, like, what would a woman like Sabina go to war and wear if she's doing the house cleaning in high heels and a little dress, and what does she wear out to war? So we had fun making it kind of this, I think of how to respectfully describe how it was. Tank tops and cut up cargo pants and fishnets and things where nobody would wear it out to the battlefield except somebody like Sabina, because she's that girl.
We've managed to survive for some time now, catch as catch can, and if the grasshoppers don't eat up our garden, we'll all live to see better days, knock on wood. Oh! My advice to you is just enjoy your ice cream while it's in your bowl. Don't forget that a few years ago, we came through the last recession by the skin of our teeth. Why, one more tight squeeze like that, and where will we be? One more tight squeeze like that, and where will we be?
Thornton Wilder wrote this play in 1942, right at the end of the First World War, when America was coming out of that war with euphoria and knowing that the world was going to be a better place, just several months before World War II began. It's interesting to me as a piece because even though it was written way, way back then as one of the first absurdist pieces of theater, one of the first pieces of theater that broke the fourth wall, as we call it, breaking character, talking direct to the audience. So much of the comedy that we see on television now, things like Modern Family, Saturday Night Live, where they break and talk directly into the camera, all comes from this play, all the way back in 1942. In addition, I think a lot of the things that it talks about, pestilence, plague, war, and man's ability to scrape by the skin of his teeth or the seat of his pants, is how we've all managed to survive. Sometimes it's sad and sometimes it's funny, and it's just absurd that we're all still here.
One more tight squeeze like that, and where will we...
Something. Stall!
Well, this certainly is a fine American home, and everybody's very happy. I can't do this. I hate this show. I don't understand a single word of it anyway. Something about the troubles the human race has been through. Besides, the author, Thornton Wilder, didn't make up his silly mind as to whether we're all living back in caves or in the suburbs, and it's this way all the way through.
I wanted a comedy. I wanted something that addressed where we were as a community, as a world. I wanted something that addressed this space we're living in, and I wanted something with strong women parts. Those were the three criteria that I was looking for. And I love Thornton Wilder, but I wasn't familiar with this play, but Lincoln Center, New York did it this last season. I was like, what is this? And I started digging into it. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so relevant in so many different ways. I know some of you were very involved with Sherlock. Some of you weren't. That's the other thing. Doing something that's not Sherlock, we got to bring in a lot of people that hadn't got to do a lot for several years because of Sherlock. Anyone want to comment?
It is such a change of pace to go from the Sherlocks, which have comedy but are mostly drama, to something that is mostly comedy but has a very tense underlying of drama. Aside from just the content, the world that this takes place in is so different from the world that Sherlock takes place in.
Sherlock is about fact.
Right.
This is not about fact.
No.
Yeah, at all. Yeah, true. Very true.
One more tight squeeze like that, and where will we be?
Sabina, you've let the fire go out. Here it is, the coldest day of the year, right in the middle of August, and you've let the fire go out.
Mrs. Antrobus, I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. Why, I can get hired in a home where they're rich enough to have a fire in every room. So you have my notice, Mrs. A. I hope that's perfectly clear.
You've let the fire go out. Have you milked the mammoth?
Yes, I've milked the mammoth.
My name is Brian Witcher. I just got done playing the role of Mr. Antrobus in The Skin of Our Teeth at the PAC.
Tell us about this character.
George Antrobus is kind of like the father figure of multiple eras of time. He sees himself, I think, as someone who starts things rolling, who invents things. He's the boss, but at the same time, he does recognize that there are some shortcomings, if you will, in his life, but also with his relationship with the rest of his family. He's struggling with that a little bit.
What did you find most difficult about this performance for you?
I think the most difficult thing for me was being able to transition from one type of character to the next, from one act to another. The eras of time that are depicted in the play start off very long time ago, and then progress forward. And so the character, I tried to make him grow as he went through time. First, kind of as almost a cavemanish type bear of a man, to a leader of maybe of the world or of a country, perhaps, definitely an army by the end of the show. So trying to find that character in each one of those acts was the biggest challenge for me.
I know we talked about through the production, everything was kind of based on situation comedies. Did you have any particular models that you followed for your different iterations of Mr. Antrobus?
I tried to pull from some older sitcoms that I enjoyed watching, Last Man Standing with Tim Allen, some more current ones, The Big Bang Theory, with the way that they interacted with each other and the mannerisms that some of the characters on that show had. And then more recently, a show that my wife and I are watching called The Neighborhood, which is a fun sitcom. It's set in Los Angeles, has different characters that have to deal with different aspects. One guy's a super happy-go-lucky type dude, and his neighbor is just completely the opposite. So trying to figure out how do I pull those different types of characteristics out of those characters is what I was doing there.
What did you find most rewarding about the experience?
Oh, I love working with all the different actors and the skill levels and so on. I mean, some are just so amazing. I loved working with Moira Taylor. She is such a professional with the show. And then, of course, the rest of the cast, just watching them grow throughout the process as you were trying to set up how do we do the show, and then seeing them pull their characters to life was just a blast.
Any surprises that you didn't, things that happened that you didn't expect?
Oh my. I really, there were a couple of scenes that we did that I thought, oh, that was a very interesting way to look at it. One of them was, as you've talked about during the show and during the Q&A after the show, is the slap scene in Act 3 where the family members and the maid are fighting, and suddenly you just came to the conclusion, we have to slap him. And I went, really? We're gonna go there?
We're going to go there, yeah.
So that was a big surprise to me. You know, the masked characters that you used in the show were a bit of a surprise. I thought, well, how are we going to do that? But the first time they were introduced, I went, okay, I don't know about this. Yeah,
Right,
honestly.
right.
But as the show progressed and as the characters developed and as the scenes really matured, I said, yeah, this is really cool, being able to look at these masks on stage. And each mask has a different characteristic, or is a different character in of itself. Just it made it easy for me to play off of them.
Wait, Brian, anything else you wanted to share about your experience that you think people at home, having watched this documentary, who didn't get to see the play, that you'd want them to know?
I think one of the biggest things to pull out of this story and out of this show is that life goes on. We all deal with struggles. We all have to face hardships in our lives. But the thing that we have to remember is there is hope. There is always something better that we can look forward to, whether it's something that we do or whether it's something someone else does for us. If you get bogged down in the negativity, you'll never pull yourself out of it. So always look for that hope. Always look for that end, if you will, that is positive.
Yeah.
It's that dinosaur on the front lawn again. Shoo! Go away! Go away!
Mrs. A, help! There are strange men coming in the house.
Miss, could you stand there, please, just for a moment? Then you can get on with the show.
Will you be quiet? All right, come on in. Young man, have you any fire with you? Well, light the grate then, will you?
The show is about an hour and a half longer, and so I really wanted to whittle it down because no one wants to sit here in these comfortable seats even for 4 hours. So I really wanted to whittle it down, and I was like, if I could get these acts 30 minutes, if I could just get then 30 minutes, like 30 minutes is a sitcom. And then I just started thinking about how you could, like if this were binge watching a sitcom that did, a decades, and how it would change through the decades to reflect the times. And just that kind of was the premise behind a lot of that.
Henry! Gladys! Children, come right in and get warm. Oh, no, when Mom says something, she means it. Henry, put down that stone. You know what happened last time. Henry! Gladys, put your dress down. Try and be a lady.
Mom, when's supper ready? Maybe it'll snow, we can make snowballs. Mom, why is it so cold?
Settle down, both of you. It's just a cold spell of some kind. Oh, Henry! Why can't you remember to keep your hair down over your forehead? Oh, you must keep that scar covered up. If your father sees it, he goes crazy.
One of the quotes I was reading about the show is that it implies that when we think about how we grow as a culture, we connect it to inventions. Now we have the microwave oven, and now we have cell phones, and now we have the wheel. And it's about those things that we attach our progress to, but it's about our humanity and how our humanity grows, that we really become better. And we don't do that with as big of milestones. humanity grows incrementally, whereas the progress of inventions is very strong and we jump to one thing to the next. So it's spiraling and it's getting just a little bit better, even with the setbacks that we face.
All right, Savannah, you can open the door. We're ready now.
Well, how's the whole cricket family? Oh, Maggie, you old gunny sack. How's the old broken down weatherhead? Savannah, you old fish bait. And the children, how have the little smellers been? Well, how they been, Maggie?
Well, I must say they've been as good as gold. I haven't had to raise my voice once. I don't know what's the matter with them.
Please share with our audience your name and who you played in the show.
Sure. My name is Moira Taylor. In the show, I played Mrs. Antrobus.
Tell me about your character that you played in the show.
So I played Mrs. Antrobus. She is the mom, wife. She keeps the home going, is one of her first lines in the show. And I think for this show, she does represent that home. That one of the things I equate it with is as you grow up and you move out of wherever you grew up, coming home is a constant. Like home always exists.
Home is safe.
Home is safe.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And I feel like that's what Mrs. Antrobus, or at least how I wanted to portray her, that she was a constant, that she created this home, built this foundation for the family.
What does home represent?
I think that she talks a lot about the promise, and especially it's starting in Act 2, that the marriage that she and Mr. Antrobus have is a promise, and that rebuilding the house and putting it back together after war is a promise, and starting over is a promise. So I think the home represents that promise of rebuilding after whatever crisis or situation that they have found themselves in.
Yeah.
That home is the promise that we do have something to look forward to. We have something to move on. We have some safety and comfort beyond.
How do you make time for community theater, and why do you make time for it?
Sure. Community theater is so important to my own personal feelings of involvement, and what I get out of it for myself is it's a chance for me to kind of stretch my legs. I'm not a jogger. I don't do other those kinds of things. Community theater is my exercise. Like, it is what I do to keep my brain sharp and keep my body and my physical life exciting, and I just it's a need to do it.
What was the biggest challenge for you with this show?
I think one of the things I struggled with early on was how important it was that you asked us to be word perfect for this show, and really to respect and aim for being perfect to the script, to get the rhythms that were so important for the show. I've done community theater and high school theater for a long time. The older I get, the more short shows that I do, the harder it is to memorize.
Yeah.
Our production staff was excellent at giving us reminders of when we were not word perfect, but I appreciated that was a challenge that we could strive for, and I think it made the show better in so many ways that we weren't paraphrasing.
What was the biggest surprise to you in the production, in the process?
I think one of the biggest surprises is how quickly and how well the family bonded. It was one of my biggest surprises of the show, is that I felt connected to these other actors. I felt supported, and that knowing that they were.
Because you knew all these people.
Yes, and I'd worked with all of them except for Grace. I'd worked with all of them before. I mean, I'd worked with Grace, but not on stage. But there was just something about the work everybody put in. I knew that anything I would throw out there, energy-wise or like thought, that it would be reciprocated. That it came back full. You know.
Well, one of the interesting dynamics in the family for me, as a director and watching kind of come together, speak directly to that with the actor Brian Witcher, who played your husband. Because you guys have done very little together. You've been aware of each other. You've been in the same circles and stuff. But then to play a husband and wife on stage, that's a whole different matter.
And I go back to the script on this, that it is not a lovey-dovey husband-wife. It is more the. I had to tell my own husband that I wasn't method acting any of this, because it is more the feeling of in a marriage or in running a household. Who's going to pick up which kid when, and like that sort of structure, and keeping that organization and that. So it was more sort of like you had said, those sort of business model type of running a household, but I think that the Act 2 is probably the hardest on their marriage. Very specifically. And I think that we talked through the resolution, like how when Act 2 ends and they keep the family going, they save the family. I think for me personally, that had a lot to do with how I related to that marriage relationship, that it was that important to her.
What was the most rewarding part of the production then?
The most rewarding part of the production is just the time I had to do it. Because like we started the conversation with, the time does not come easily, but it is so important to me to do. It was so rewarding to just be able to do it. It was rewarding to, I would say, work with this particular group of people, and then also just to have the opportunity to do this show that no one does. That is my that's my cup of tea. That's my bread and butter. I enjoy the theater, the plays that are that you do have to get in the weeds to really make it a production that's of value. I don't do a lot of musicals. I very rarely. Not that musicals aren't fantastic, and I will go see them all day long because I enjoy watching them. But for me, as an actor, it is getting into a play that the script is so dense and complex, and you do have to spend, like we did, the first 3 weeks of rehearsal, taking one act at a time and like really diving into what does
those are
this
the words,
mean?
but what is she saying?
What does this mean? Yeah.
And
how does this?
And is it the sitcom character, the actor playing them, or me?
Yes, and how does what this character is saying affect this character, and how all of that interconnects.
Oh, Sabina, there's some food there for you to haul to the kitchen. Oh, Henry, you haven't done anything rash today, eh, Henry? Nothing rash.
No, Dad.
Oh, good. That's good. Hell's bells, Sabina, you let the fire go out.
Mr.
Nice
Andrews,
fire.
I've given my notice. I'm leaving.
Well, if you leave now, you'll freeze to death, so go cook the dinner. Oh, here we go, fella. Ready? Ha!
Pessimism, optimism? For the future? That's interesting. Anybody want to address that?
Well, I think the nature of it is optimistic in many ways. I think it is more hopeful than it is pessimistic. Conflict is part of human nature. That's the whole reason that Henry is a character. You know, it's the nature of conflict. As long as there is two people in a room, they will fight over something. But there is a resolution to every single conflict. No matter what, there has to be some sort of peacetime. And in the peacetime, who else do you have but the other people around you?
Yeah, and if you look at the end of each act, the end of the first act, right? They're building the fire, they're figuring out how to move along. At the end of the second act, the family is moving off to move on to build and start over. And at the end of the third act, here we are around the table saying, hey, let's start over.
And they're all physically, the end of every act, everyone comes together.
That's
The
exactly
family comes
right.
together every time.
Yep,
They start together, they're spread apart, things happen, but they come back.
come back together.
It reminds me of when Mrs. Antrobus says to Sabina, that it's like their duty to continue and to restart. And
The
uphold
conversation at the table in Act 3.
which
Yeah.
is a
Do you
good-
see this house?
It's a good difference between in Act 1 when they're arguing over the table. And then at the end, no matter everything that these two have been through together, Mrs. Antrobus is like, it's our duty to continue to humanity and to society and everything, because in the end, we are all that we have.
Yeah.
No! Did you get my text?
Yes, M. What's a wheel? Nice. George, what does this cold weather mean? It's below freezing.
Not in front of the children.
George, shouldn't we do something about it? Head south, move.
Not in front of the children.
Oh, Dad, you pinched me.
Yeah, that's to help you remember today. Today, the day the alphabet's finished and the wheel is invented. Oh, what a day I had at the office.
Why do I have the red mark on my face? I'm Cain. This is the mark of Cain. See, it's a seed.
See, it's a biblical reference.
There are a lot of biblical references in the show. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, what else? There's probably 80 other things that it refers to in the show.
Well,
Say again? All the philosophers, yeah. The words that we draw knowledge and faith from. Sometimes it's from a philosopher, sometimes it's from the Bible. Yeah.
3 times 6 is 18.
Gladys, what do you know?
The night is come and none too soon, and blinking silently the little moon.
Maggie put something in Gladys's head on the chance she could use it.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and
God
earth.
created the heavens and the earth.
And the earth was waste and void.
Earth was
We'll need
waste
everything
and
that
void.
does fire for to save the human race. Ushers, will you pass the chairs up here?
And the
Thank
dark,
you.
the light he called day, and the darkness he called night.
Emily, please tell us your name and what you do and who you play in the show.
I am Emily Kohler. I was playing Bailey Summers as Gladys.
So tell us a little bit about your character.
Gladys is the youngest member of the Antrobus family, and she is kind of the symbol of hope and looking to the future, and she sees everything through these rose-tinted glasses, and it's totally not typecast at all. She is, whereas the mom tends to be more nurturing and like Henry would be more spiteful, she is, we will get through this because we will get through this. We have to, we will, and she like sees the good in everything.
What did you find difficult about this role? Because it's pretty close to the skin.
Yeah, it's I was had a lot of fun doing it because a lot of the way Gladys sees the world is the way I see the world, but it was difficult to kind of portray that, but also portray her as a growing human. I'm not a child. I'm not a teenager. I've been through that. I remember it, but I'm done with it. I'm still growing, of course, but I'm not growing through like adolescence as Gladys was. She's very, very young in the beginning. And so I start the show as a very, very young child, and then I end as an adult with a child of her own. And that's a lot of growth to go in like an hour and a half or so.
Right.
Like I've been through it, now I'm speed running it.
What was the most rewarding part of doing this show?
The collaboration, I think, with the other actors. A lot of what I got to do with my character came from what Brian would say about his character. I could play off of that. Or we'd look at each other and we'd create these little moments. And like Jay, especially with Jay playing my brother, I had very good castmates to connect with. They were all incredibly talented, and it was so rewarding to get to work with them and see what they were bringing and kind of play off of them.
Yeah. Well, and we were just talking a minute ago about the difficulties. These characters are what I would call archetypes.
Oh yeah.
They each represent something, and they're pretty stilted and dry when you read them on the page. So, you've said, and we've talked a lot about it, that your character represents hope and the future. But how do you make that a character? You know what I mean? I mean, it's one thing to be an emblem or a logo, or like a Mickey Mouse or something. Mickey Mouse is hopeful, and he just kind of, but there's more. You were able to find a depth to that, though.
Well, like having hope and being hope doesn't mean that you don't see what's going on. She's not happy the entire time. In fact, somebody who saw the show came up to me and said, there was a lot of sad you in this show. I didn't really care for that. And I'm, interesting. But she doesn't not know what's going on. She sees all of this and she is hopeful in spite of it. She never loses that hope of the future, and she always bounces back even when things aren't going well. So she's not always happy, but she is happy.
Why do you do theater?
Because it makes me happy.
And again, happy. So dig a little deeper there. Why do you do theater? What does it give? I mean, because it's not easy.
No.
And it can be very frustrating.
Oh, almost, because I can't imagine not doing it. It's with Gladys. She can't imagine not being hopeful. This is a part of who I am, and it has been for a very long time. And it's incredibly rewarding, and a lot of the connections that I've made in our community are in the theater. Most of my friends are in the theater. Where I go to hang out is rehearsal. I go and I say hi to everybody, and then we work, and then we talk after rehearsal, and it just sort of makes sense to me, and it feels right.
What do you think of theater as therapy or theater as hobby?
It's both.
We have our families, we have our day-to-day life, we have our work, and that all takes up a lot of time. Theater takes a lot of time.
It does.
So why, with the very limited amount of free time that you have as an adult, would you spend so much of your life doing theater?
You said therapy. It actually is therapy for a lot of people. It's funny, we were doing this show, which is about the struggles of humanity, and Grace touched upon this in Q&A, I think yesterday, about how a lot of us were going through the struggles of humanity during the show. And it's almost like you come to rehearsal and you can put all of that away for a couple hours. You know what you're doing, you're getting a routine, you're setting your routine in place, and then once the show starts, you have your routine, you do it, you know what's coming, and it's fun. And it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, and you know what to expect.
If someone watching this didn't get to see the show, and we know there were a lot of people who did not.
They missed out.
And didn't get to see the show. What would you tell them about this show? What is the show about? What could they have gleaned from it, or even just watching bits and pieces of the documentary about it?
It is one of the most absurd ways that you could watch humans be human and just sort of feel a connection to people that you've never met. Like you kind of meet them quickly, and then you kind of get involved and like invested in what's going to happen to all 5 of them, all 4 of the family in Sabina. And they're people, they're humans, they're us. And it's sort of like you used the term binge watching when you were talking about the show, and that you kind of binge watching people.
History.
I know a lot of Doctor Who fans could probably really relate to that, because it's a lot about humanity, especially in the David Tennant era. He loves humans, and a lot of the episodes focus on, here's what this human's going to do, and like a lot of the alien creatures tend to think, well, you're not going to do this because you're human. Humans are lame, humans are bad, and then they surprise him. He loves the tenacity and just the way humans bounce back, and he's so impressed with them. And you kind of get like a little condensed version of that with our show, because humans are incredible, and they can be horrible, and they can be absurd, and they're all of those things. And you see all of that in our show.
What was the most challenging aspect for the show for you?
Oh, jeez. I'm not sure, because the role was so close to who I am.
You fell into the role very easily. It's very nice to fall into a role like that. I don't want to say lines, because I didn't have as many lines as other people, but that's something I do struggle with, memorizing them. Once I've got them, I've got them. But until then, I'm worried I'm going to forget it, and then I do, and then it's fine. And then we move on, because that's why we rehearse. So I think just setting that routine and figuring out where we were going, once I figure it out, I'm fine. But figuring out where we're going with the show, I got to figure it out. That's sort of where I always have we start, I got to figure it out, and then I'm good. And anything you'd like to leave the viewers knowing about the show and the experience, the PAC, the people, anything? Now that the show is over, the run is done.
Yeah.
What do you take away from all of that?
It's honestly a really good example of the fleeting beauty of theater, because everyone who's done a show knows you put all this hard work into it, and you make all these connections, and then you do the show, and then it's done. And it's so sad, and sometimes people ask, well, why would you do that? If it makes you so sad, why would I not do it? It makes me so happy, and that sadness is part of that happiness, and that goes back to humans. The sadness is part of the happiness, and it's just, like, this show really, really shows how beautiful theater can be and how fast it can be. Because it's gone, but it's still,
fleeting. You're right,
so fleeting,
yeah.
But it's worth it.
If the waters rise, I'll be around. I'll help you get to higher ground. Without you, we'll get through by the skin of our teeth. Yeah, me and you. We'll get through by the skin of our teeth.
The Skin of Our Teeth is filmed before a live theater audience.
Fellow Bama and all the esteemed silent and gladness and orders of the animal kingdom, welcome to Atlantic City.
As someone who's creating something, you're influenced by so many different things. And one of the things in the 1942 version of this that they used to introduce the family is a newsreel. They have a TV announcer on stage and a single slideshow flipping by the slides, and they do like a newsreel thing. And it's like 3-4 pages long. And I went, oh, I can do that a lot faster. And so that's where the first initialization of that was to save time, condense, and in like 30 seconds of that opening video, you know who these people are. I don't have to introduce them to you. The other thing that I didn't think about until we were like into things, WandaVision. was on Disney Plus a couple of years ago, and that had to have been in the back of my mind because I think there's a lot of influence from watching that I didn't even know that I was influenced by.
Has President Antrobus come back yet?
Oh, no. Get out of here!
I'm afraid I'll miss him. Oh, Esmeralda, if I fail in this, I'll die. I know I'll die. Esmeralda, tell me my future. All right, I'll tell you my future. I'll take President Antrobus away from his wife. Then I'll take every man away from his wife. I'll turn the whole earth upside down.
Actually, in the original version, they call for a full-size dinosaur and a woolly mammoth to be in the first act. And
I am definitely not full size.
Milk the mammoth, yeah. And Allison thought we just really needed that woolly mammoth, so she found a woolly mammoth stuffed animal that Emily has. So that's kind of our nod to that extra dinosaur that we clearly did not have room or budget for. But yeah, the original was just as crazy. It didn't have cell phones, didn't talk about COVID, but it was just as crazy and silly. Actually, the cell phone ringing in the original is a Philip Morris telegraph boy who comes in and does a singing telegraph to share all the information that the husband has invented the alphabet and all of that. And so that wouldn't really have been relevant to this era, so we changed it out for something else.
Gladys Antrobus, put your dress down. Try and be a lady. Oh, goodness. Where's Henry? He was just here a minute ago. Henry!
I'll put your eye out. I'll make you yell like you've never yelled before.
Henry, behave yourself.
That's right, young man. There are too many people in the world. Everybody's in the way. Except oneself.
All I wanted was some fun.
But what were you doing, Henry?
Everybody's always trying to push me around. I'll make them sorry.
Put that slingshot down.
I won't.
Tell us your name and what you do and who you played in the show.
Hey, of course, I'm Jay Hockenberry. And in The Skin of Our Teeth, I played Henry Antrobus, the darling homicidal son of the family.
Tell us a little bit about your character.
Henry is, overall, I think he's a sweet guy, but he's got a murderous streak. He's he's emblematic of Cain, of course.
Now go into that a little bit deeper.
He not only is emblematic of Cain, he is literally Cain himself, being that's his name.
Cain from the Bible.
Yes, Cain and Abel thing. And he's jealous. He's quick to rage. And this leaves a sort of stain on his behavior, because I don't think neither him nor Cain were specifically bad people by design. It's that they are capable of committing evil. All people are.
You've talked very nicely about him as a character, as a person. What does he symbolize in the play?
Henry symbolizes a bunch of things. He symbolizes like sibling rivalry in the family. Cain's original sin was murder, killing his brother out of jealousy because he liked God's gift better, or God liked his gift better. And that's shown throughout the show, that Henry is not the favored child of his father. Yeah. He's not the darling to George Antrobus as his sister Gladys is. There's that element of sibling rivalry there. There's also the element of chaos. Henry is emblematic of all of the chaotic things about human life, war, violence.
Anarchy.
Exactly. And, however, I also think he's got a little bit of positive symbolism too. I mean, change has to happen. It always will happen. Think of all the good things that have been brought about by change. Change is almost a neutral factor in life. It brings both good and bad, but it will always happen.
Talk a little bit about your character's relationship with his father,
and
how that is and how that reflects humanity in a broader spectrum.
George and Henry are constantly butting heads. There still is a sign, especially in Act 1, before things really reach the head that they do in later acts. They still love each other. You know, Henry rushes over and hugs his dad in Act 1, and Act 2, his dad, you know, gives him a little treat, gives him $1, go run around with your sister, kind of thing. There has always been this sort of a dynamic in fiction and as well in many aspects of life of the father and the son, you know, the whole coming together, because you have the old alpha male and the new alpha male.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of deal. However, in the end, they realize that there's a lot more similar to them. They're very much more similar to themselves than they really are different, and that's where the familial bond there kind of comes from.
What was the most challenging aspect of the production for you?
Most challenging aspect of the production for me was characterizing Henry, I guess, and trying to understand what Thornton Wilder meant when he was writing this character. Because, well, Henry's a complicated character. He is an odd-shaped puzzle piece, and it's really hard to find where he fits within the overall diagram of the show without putting all the other pieces together first. So to properly characterize Henry, there's a lot of reflection, analysis, and almost homework to be done in understanding the character and wanting to portray him correctly.
What was the most rewarding aspect of doing the show?
Most rewarding aspect of doing the show, well, of course, there's the whole getting to work with all my great friends, Bart Lovins, Grace Pete, Emily Kohler, Moira Taylor.
And the rest.
You know, I list off the whole cast list. But because the Antrobus family carries so much from our real lives, from how the family dynamic is, the most rewarding part outside of, you know, getting to be with my friends is getting to reflect and connect these different pieces that Thornton Wilder was writing about with the life that we live in.
Considering he wrote it in 1942, and we like to think we've come a long way. We like to think there's been a lot of change. There's certainly been a lot of chaos. Yet a lot of the things that are touchstones of this play written in 1942, we're still working on today. Did anything surprise you about the production? Something you didn't anticipate?
I didn't anticipate, well, and this is going back to our previous topic of discussion, I didn't anticipate how relevant it would be thematically. Of course, as a student of history, you realize that these things are cyclical, that they continue constantly in so many ways, in different forms, but they still continue. So I suppose that was a folly on my part, not realizing how relevant that this show would be. It's like during the discussions we would do at the end of every production, bringing it to real life and connecting it, and that was just so surprising how much there was to connect there. It's like when you open a coloring book and you finally connect the dots.
What do you get out of doing community theater? Why do you invest so much of your time and energy in being part of community theater?
Well, there's so many reasons for that. For one thing, I think that the arts is one of the best walkways for connecting communities, whether it's performing arts or visual art, music, what have you. People have always and will always be drawn to art, and there's no better way to bridge the gaps in our community than by supporting community arts. I think it's one of the most important things that we can do as members of our local community. You know, whether that be going to see a show at the PAC or going to a blues festival downtown or what have you. Even going up to your friend and saying, "Hey man, you know, I know you've been learning guitar, why don't you play me something?"
Yeah.
You know, it's an easy and practical way supporting each other that comes at a very low both material and human cost, I feel like.
Yeah. Well,
because performers will always love performing, and people get something out of it. They get to see entertainment. They get to see a show.
You're talking about the supportive cast and stuff. I also think there's a therapeutic element to doing community theater.
Without a doubt.
Do you find it therapeutic?
Oh yeah. And I think a lot of actors do. You know, it's getting to take off your shoes and put on a different pair. It's like when Mr. Rogers comes in at the beginning of the episode. You know, he takes off his shoes and he puts his sneakers on. You know.
And you know, we're doing something different now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maggie, a man can stand a family only just so long. I'm warning you.
Oh, George Antrobus, how can you say a thing like that? You have the best family in the whole world.
Good morning, Miss Fairweather.
Who on earth was that, George?
What? Oh, that's a friend of mine, Maggie. A very nice, reputable girl.
Mr. and Mrs. Antrobus. Antrobus is the Greek form of the word family or something like that. I can't remember now. But they represent, in some ways, Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve, if you want to, Garden of Eden, they name all of the animals. They're kind of in charge of the animals. And so we've got the apes. We've got all of the animals that Adam and Eve are taking care of or elected to be. So they've all convened here for this political convention, and he's the president that's been elected to represent all of them. Boy, that's from a whole bunch of different things tied together for that, yeah. And we look at all three acts. Act 1 is about family and about refugees, and there's been a lot of talk about securing borders and things like that. Then in Act 2, you're talking about Noah's Ark, and you're talking about politics. And then in Act 3, we're dealing with war and stuff.
George Antrobus, not a minute to lose. Don't you see the 4 lights of the weather signal? Get your family into that boat at the end of the pier.
Family? What family? I have no family. Maggie! They won't come.
Oh, they'll come, Antrobus. Now, take the animals with you into the boat. All of them. 2 of each kind.
George, what's the matter with you? This is just a storm like any other storm, isn't it?
Maggie!
Isn't it?
Maggie!
Here I am, George. And here is Gladys.
Where have you been? I need you, Maggie.
I know.
I really try to go into the process with laying everything out. All right, here we go. This is it. But then you discover things when you cast people in the show that they bring, and you go, oh, wait a minute. We can build off this. We can change that. Act 3, the big fight in Act 3. We discovered a lot through that process. We discovered a lot physically, what was going to work and what wasn't. But we were able to kind of, because the third act, the style of Jay's performance in Act 3, I would describe as a more method, more grounded, more earthy approach, whereas everybody else on stage is still trying to do a sitcom. And the conflict between those two styles leads into the conflict between the father and the son, which is something, if you have a father or a son, you've probably dealt with. If not, wait for it. Because we have those conflicts. And that's part of growing up. That's part of moving on. Civil war, brother against brother, all these kind of things, all kind of built into that one conflict until she literally has to slap sense into it. And the slap was one of the last things we added. It wasn't like part of my original choreography at all, but it built to such a point. It's like, well, you got to slap him, right? It was just like.
That's how he said it too.
How did we get there?
Yeah.
Why did we make that decision?
Yeah.
You got to hit him.
It was just so it's very interesting. It's part of the process. Yeah.
Back to the kitchen with you! George Antrobus, now's your chance! A new world to make! Bingo! And you had your day! Game over!
So tell us your name and what you do and the role you played in the show.
My name is Grace Lillian, and I played a woman with many names, predominantly Sabina. We gave her the first name of Bernadette. Her actor's name is Bernadette Somerset. And then in Act 2, I think she's Lily Fairweather.
I think that's right. Explain for us just a little bit why you have numerous names.
So, as far as the actor's character changing names in Act 2, I think that is intended as kind of to play at Sabina being a little bit of a shapeshifter, kind of changing with the times to figure out how to best survive whatever comes next, sort of thing. But the difference between Sabina and Miss Somerset is the actor playing the character versus the character.
So you are playing an actress named Somerset, who in the world of the play is playing a character called Sabina.
Yes. Well, usually.
That's-
She's usually playing.
very
Sometimes she
simple.
goes, I'm done playing, and
Yes.
then she's just herself.
A lot of breaking the fourth wall.
So much
Well,
breaking
and,
the fourth
and
wall.
the fourth wall, what I mean by fourth wall is the invisible wall that separates the performer from the audience.
Yes.
That we always pretend like they're not there, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden we turn and we talk directly
Right
to
at
them. That's breaking the fourth wall. Tell us about your character Sabina, and who and what she is.
So Sabina, in my eyes, and I'm sure that there are a million interpretations of her character because this show is pretty absurd, but I feel like Sabina represents self-preservation in times of hardship. Her character comes across as very shallow and very selfish, and she's very much focused on herself. But I think that there's this really intense humanity to the fact that that comes from the knowledge that she wants to survive. She's not necessarily selfish solely because she wants her life to be better. She's selfish, she's self-centered because she knows that she has to have her own back. If she wants to get through an ice age or a war or a flood, she's got to be able to take care of herself. And that self-preservation, I think, is sort of the main aspect of her character.
What was the most difficult part of this?
At our read-through, everyone was talking about, well, it's all about humanity doing better and moving forward and moving on. And I was like, is it? Is that what this show is about? I felt the cyclical nature of it. I watched this unfold and I read this story and I went, oh, this sure is about how hard everything is all of the time, especially when it was being reflected in my day-to-day. But then I went to see this cast of people who went, no, the point here is less about the hardship and more about the survival. And it was pretty inspiring, and it raised the level of hope that I had in myself and in our show.
What was then the most rewarding part of it for you then?
The knee-jerk reaction is to say who I worked with.
Sure.
This cast was incredible. They're just some very, very talented, very remarkable individuals that I have both really enjoyed getting to know as friends, as well as have admired watching them on stage for a little while now. So
In other
it was,
things. And
yes. It was very rewarding to see those people kind of hone their craft and do this on display, whether they knew they were on display or not. But I found it very rewarding to find a humanity in a character that I didn't connect with originally. There's a lot of talk about war with family and anger and all of that, and that discussion had me connecting very instantly with Henry. Henry's character was one that I was like, I see me. I see
That's
it.
me.
I know how to do that. I know how to do the, I'm so angry with the world that I want to change it. I have not grown up in an environment where putting yourself first is really ever encouraged. And I think that has done a lot of good and a little bit of bad in the mentality of I struggle to look at a person like Sabina and not go, oh, she's the worst. She's horrible. She only cares about herself. And how can you do that when there are other people around you? And I found it kind of strangely reaffirming to watch this character brought to life in part by what I was doing, but more by what other people were saying about her character. Discussions with you and with Moira and Emily and Brian and Jay. Those conversations kind of made me go, oh, she's more than just selfish. She's more than just, I do what I want because I want my life to be better. She really is a person who is just trying to survive.
Anything that surprised you in the process, something you had not anticipated?
Liking Brian's character.
That's a tough one. I know I've had several conversations. It's tough.
I had a big disconnect with Brian's character, which makes sense with how much I relate to Henry.
Well, and your life experiences and
right.
whatever you're bringing to the table and how that character is written.
Right. There was definitely an initial like, okay, I'll deal with him because he's in the show, but okay.
Because we have a couple of different levels happening in the show.
Mm-hmm.
There is the kind of the play within the play. There is the play being performed, and then there are the actors performing those characters. And we break character frequently and show those actors and what they're dealing with. And things kind of come to a head in Act 3. Talk to me a little bit about that from your perspective and what went about and how that scene became what it became.
My character, my actor playing a character, broke often. So it's not necessarily explosive. She drops the act regularly. And although I wanted there to be a significant difference between the two characters, it's not necessarily dramatic. It's what's the word?
Almost casual, the way you would break.
Right, distinct, but not like emotional.
Well, you talk about things that were not anticipated or that are a surprise. Your reveal of the beef bouillon cubes.
Beef bouillon cubes.
Always got to laugh. And I hoped it would. I didn't know that it would, but there was we really played with how you were going to deliver that and which way you're facing and the beats of that. We were really drilled on that.
Yeah.
In hopes that we had built it to a point where their expectation of this great thing and the reveal that it's just bouillon.
It was kind of a blessing and curse. The laugh track was that I could never tell what was real laughter and what was fake laughter. So the energy that you usually get when you're feeding off of the audience who's laughing at your jokes, stuff like that, I did not get. I would go backstage and be like, it's such a great audience, everybody's laughing. And I'd be like, are they? Are they laughing? I think is just precious. I love that moment when Sabina is just revealed to be, it's, I think, the moment where you see that Sabina's human.
If the wars we wage destroy most men, you and I will start again. Black and blue, we'll get through by the skin of our teeth. Yeah, me and you, we'll get through by the skin of our teeth.
Mrs. Antrobus, Gladys, where are you? You can come out now. now. The war's over. The peace treaty's been signed. Where are they? Please don't be dead. Whew. Mrs. Antrobus? Gladys? Mr. Antrobus will be here this afternoon. I just saw him downtown. Hurry and put things in order.
In the first act, I wanted the focus to stay on the family, even though there was all this chaos going around. I wanted the focus to stay on the family. I also had this vision in my mind of the refugees kind of being a huddled mass. That, we don't really, I didn't want to humanize them in any way as a reflection of somehow, how we sometimes deal with the homeless. We sometimes deal with people encroaching our borders. We tend to make them monolithic. And so I wanted that same kind of feeling in the act. In Act 2, it calls for all of the characters at the convention to be animals. And so it was that was just trying to figure out how we were going to do that. If we were just going to have humans with name tags that had animal names on them. Because I went with masks in Act 1, we decided to go with the animal masks in Act 2.
He says now that the war's over, we'll all have to settle down and be perfect.
Miss Somerset, we have to stop for a moment.
They may be hiding out in the back.
Miss Somerset, we have to stop for a moment.
What's the matter now?
There's an explanation we have to make to the audience. Lights, please.
Lights, please!
We took a lot of time layering in each piece of Act 2 because it's supposed to be chaos, I remember talking to our technical director, Aaron Taylor. I came up to him and I said, all right, I want the end of Act 2 to be like the Poseidon Adventure or the Towering Infernal, some kind of disaster movie. He was like, okay. But he talked it through with me, and we figured out some things that we could do that would make all of that work. Plus, you've got 10 minutes between acts to, Chloe was talking about costume changes. These are some of the biggest intermission set changes we've ever dealt with a show. So that's, getting all of those pieces to work out at the same time. Right, Cara? Cara spends a lot of time downstairs. What for you, talk closer to Ethan or to your dad so we can hear you, but what were some of the difficulties you faced with some of those changes?
Just trying to get everyone assigned jobs so that we're not all trying to do the same thing at once and something gets forgotten.
And Paige and Parker, our production managers, they were instrumental in making sure that it wasn't just, all right, do this. You really, without the assigned positions, it would have been as much chaos down here as it was during Act 2. So everything that you saw in Act 2, there are little things that change, but by and large, it is the same every exact time. Give or take kicking a light, it's the same the stage moves exactly the same time, the exactly same inches. We're really, and everything's spiked, and it is as safe as it can be and be the Poseidon Adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, an unfortunate accident has taken place backstage.
Accident?
Management feels that, in fact, we all feel that you are due an apology. Yeah,
What's going on?
Four of our actors have been taken ill. I'm not exactly clear what happened.
That's terrible.
Well, and the top of Act 3, for half the cast to get sick, we lived that too. And the fear, the anxiety that comes with that. What happened? How did they get sick? Why are they sick? Am I going to get sick? All of that we've had to deal with too. Yeah.
We do little ad-libs there while Mickey comes on stage, and it's been a lot of fun for me because I'm sitting with my back to you guys, so I get to watch everybody else doing things, and that's great. And I'm just watching people ad-lib and stuff like that, and when he says they've been taken ill, I noticed that at least half of the people standing on stage immediately went, "Oh, do they have COVID?" And I knew, I caught myself doing it too, and I was like, that is such a shift from before when it was like, "Oh, do they have a stomach virus? Do they have food poisoning?" And now it's Now it's unanimous. Oh, they had COVID.
Let's not all talk all at once. Wait. Fitz, can you tell us what's up?
Well, these 4 actors all had dinner together after yesterday's show, and apparently they ate something that disagreed with them.
Disagreed with them? They're at Baptist East this very minute, having their stomachs pumped in perfect agony.
It was that lemon meringue pie.
It was the fish.
It was the canned tomatoes.
No, it was the fish.
They're going to be okay. They just have to stay for observation.
What's your name?
Chloe Patterson.
And what do you do, Chloe?
In the play, I am a muse, a coveneer, and a prop master.
Tell us a little bit about the characters you play in the show.
For the muse, I play one of 3 sisters. We're part of the mass of people who come in asking for refugee. It's kind of really it. I kind of tried to pretend like she was more poised and proper because she thought she was like, I'm a singer, so I'm better than everybody. For the coveneer, I am a duck and an elephant because we wear masks. For the duck, I just try to be all like sassy because I always imagine when ducks are like waddling away, they have a little bit of sass in their step. And then I'm not the elephant for long. But
That's quick, yeah.
Yeah, it's very quick, but I do try to like power walk out there basically. Like puff my chest out and, walk across the stage like I'm important,
And then in the 3rd act, you have your most difficult character.
Myself.
Right?
I play myself as prop master. And for that, I cranked up my personality up to 10. I'm like super helpful, but also like kind of attitudinal because I tend to be like that.
This was your first time working with masks. So what was that experience like?
Challenging at first. I will say it was very challenging because I want to show emotions with my face instead of gestures. But when we first got the masks on, I still found myself doing that.
Behind the mask?
Behind the mask. And then after a while of, you telling me to crank it up, I was like, I'm just going to act like a cartoon character.
Right.
That's the best way to do it, is to pretend that I am a cartoon character on stage and just big movements, lots of head turning, and lots of being enthusiastic when people are talking to show emotion.
Would you say that working in the mask was the most difficult part of the show? Was there something else that was really challenging?
Honestly, for me, after the cartoon part, the mask wasn't as difficult as it originally was.
Yeah.
Quick changes is what got me. Because there was many times where I was like, it's places, and I'm still trying to fix my tights and put my shoes on.
What was your most rewarding piece of doing the show?
Getting done my lines.
Getting down your lines. Why is that? Because as an ensemble member, you didn't have a whole lot of lines.
Yeah.
So why was that so?
A lot of it is just tongue twisting. I always tend to struggle a little bit with lines because words get jumbled up in my head because I've been looking at them for so long, and then it's like, was it this first or this one? I was fine with Act 1 and 2 because I had very little lines. Act 3 seemed to be the most for me.
You had a big paragraph you had to read.
Yes, and it was Aristotle's part that mostly, because we don't talk like that in modern day.
Right.
So I would always find myself trying to modernize it, and I'm like, well, I can't do that. It's a quote. Like, I can add little tidbits to the other parts, but I can't add anything to this. So that was the hardest part for me.
Out of your experience doing the show, did any part of the experience surprise you? Something maybe you didn't anticipate?
The masks.
The masks?
At first, I didn't know we were doing masks, so that surprised me when we first talked about the mask and at the mask workshop. And
what did you think about the mask workshop?
It was fun. I found myself, because I'm an artist, I've talked about this before, I found myself using shape language.
Right. You talk to us a little bit more about shape language.
So as an artist, you learn that shape language, especially in cartoons, rounder characters tend to be more bubbly and happier. Sharper characters like triangles tend to be more stern and tend to lean more towards the evil side. And then like squares are kind of like that common ground in between. I looked at my masks because they were very highly characterized. And I was like, this person has a very sharp jawline, but they also have a very round nose. So how can I play with both characteristics at the same time?
Jumping into community theater shows, which you've done a few in a row now, that eats up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
Why do you do it?
It's fun. I mean, a lot of people need hobbies. And while I do have my art hobby, it doesn't bring me a lot out into the community a lot. And so humans need human interaction. As much as I am an introvert, I do need to talk to people every once in a while. And when I was younger, I found a passion in theater when my first play I watched was Phantom of the Opera. So it started out with musicals. I'm not great of a singer.
But they're exciting.
But they're exciting to watch. And then I realized I can be a part of that at the PAC or like other community theaters that are around here. So I did a lot with HCP originally because I knew a couple people there. I was mostly tech until Midsummer Night's Dream. I was the Blue Fairy in that. And then I was like, wow, they're doing Beauty and the Beast. I love Beauty and the Beast. I was like, I know I'm not going to get in, but I would still love to go in tech for them. So I did that. And then I heard that there was Skin of Our Teeth. No idea what that was at the moment.
Sure, yeah.
But I was like, it's right after. I might as well try it. And then I got in, so it was pretty fun.
Your visual artwork is a great hobby, but it's very solitary. Theater is social by the nature of it. I also think it's therapy. Both forms of art are therapy in some way for us. Don't you think we get something out of it in that sense as well?
I think so, because while I can sit home and draw anything to cope with what's going on, a lot of the time it's not the same as talking to another person or just interacting. So it was nice when I would have rough days and I would come to the theater and just be able to wash it all away and just focus on what I'm doing.
Focus on something else, yeah.
Naturally, we haven't enough understudies to cover all those roles, but we do have a number of splendid volunteers who have kindly consented to help us out. These friends have sat through the rehearsals.
Sat through?
Actors. Have watched all the rehearsals, and they assure me that they know the lines in the business quite well.
Jeff, what was this process like for you? You've done several musical composing things for us in the past.
Well, this was a lot of fun. You contacted me in the summer, I believe.
Yeah.
And we talked about what you were looking at doing this as a sitcom. And so then Allison and I got together because you and Allison had written some lyrics, and Allison came over and we talked about musical ideas and talked about those lyrics. And then I sat down with the lyrics and started just coming up with songs in my head that would work with that. Also keeping in, it's a strange process because I'm thinking about how long is this going to run? How long, because what I started out with was too short. And so it's like, okay, well, how do I change this, make it longer and more? And so by the time, so it's a long process. Then it was like, okay, well, then what instruments do I hear? And so I did a whole bunch of work on it. And then I said, okay, well, now I'm going to send it to Bart, see if he likes it.
Yeah.
And you did. And as we went through, you and I had a couple times, we made some small changes, but it was fun to write the same song over and over again with slight changes. Like, I came up with that initial theme and the initial music, and then after I had recorded it, when I was walking around, I started humming it, and I think, I need some female voices to come in and sing that part for at least one of these versions of the song. And so I got Madeline and her friend Kate Schertz to do it, and then I had Hannah Bowman add in her voice with it so that it got this really cool ba 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 da 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 da. And so just this adding things it was just fun. It was just a whole lot of fun.
In the original script, Thornton Wilder introduces the Antrobus family through newsreels they like do a newsreel thing, and I'm just like, and I've seen some productions that will do a newscast, and they go on. It's a long process to try to introduce all of these characters before you actually see them. And, I mean, and in 30 seconds of video, you guys knew what you were gonna see in that first scene, without having to go through and introduce everybody. It was a real time saver. The original runtime for this show probably is like 3+ hours long. So you may never see this production again, and you'll certainly never see a shorter production.
Let me introduce them to you. Our stagehand, Ben Shockley, a distinguished youth theater performer for many years.
Good for you, Ben. Good for you.
For the love of God. Thank you. Chloe Patterson, our prop master.
Chloe.
Allison Lovins, our costumer.
Beautiful Allison.
And our head usher for tonight, Miss...
Oh, no.
You volunteered.
No, I didn't.
What's your name?
Dottie Gilmore.
Miss Gilmore.
You've known me for 20 years.
You must not have made an impression.
Oh.
Tell us your name and what you do, and then what you did in the show.
I am Jordan Danielle. I play the reporter in Amuse, but I like the reporter a little bit more. And I got to yell at Mr. Antrobus and Mrs. Antrobus multiple times.
Tell us a little bit more about the characters you played in the show.
So the Muse was a set of 3 sisters, and I felt like in my mind I was the annoyed sister. So if I had a comment made towards me, I was very resentful about it. And then the reporter, she was just like a happy-go-lucky person, but they picked her on the wrong day to do this casting. And she was just done with everything.
And then in Act 3, you come in as one of the performers, as an actress, just kind of going, what's going on, and
myself.
Kind of an improv kind of scene for you guys, right?
Yeah. So I was pretty much just being myself, and I'm a little bit mean at times, but I'm also really kind. And at that point, I was just like, why are we stopping for like the 30th time in this show? And just was over that. So I was like, all right, okay, what time is it? Okay, cool, it's time to go.
What was the most challenging part of doing this show?
I would say, honestly, the mask, but also me just getting over my fear of being on stage and talking.
Well, that sounds huge.
Yeah.
So, but this is not the first piece of theater you've done, right?
No, but I felt like it was very intimidating to be on that stage because I've only been on a small stage.
It's different, isn't it?
Yes.
It's interesting. There's a lot of things that are different. Every stage is different. I know people that are very comfortable on our stage because the audience seems further away. And when the lights are in your face, you can't see the audience, as opposed to like Hardin County Playhouse, which is a small stage, and you can see everybody, and it's very intimate. So there's people who get stage fright from being in a big space. There's people who get stage fright from being in an intimate space. You know, it's very interesting. You mentioned also that the masks were challenging. In what ways? And other than the obvious, I cannot see where I'm walking, right?
Yes. So one aspect of it was just trying to perform and making your gestures like bigger than they needed to be because it's not normal.
Right.
So you're like, okay, I got to do this, but you got to do it bigger. I got to do this. And so just having to make your physicality be bigger than it should. And then just my makeup, I didn't want my makeup to get messed up. But I tried to have Allison help me with the sponge, and like I should have did it like before a show, but instead I did it during the show, and I couldn't see anything.
So you put the sponge in so it would save your makeup, but it changed the position of the mask, and then you couldn't see.
Yeah. I had to be helped up the stairs and down the stairs.
Oh my gosh, which is funny because there was also a blind character in that scene, but it wasn't yours.
Yeah.
What was the most rewarding part of doing the production?
Honestly, it sounds kind of cheesy, but just meeting everyone.
Yeah.
Like some people already knew them, but other people I got to hear a little bit of their life and their aspect, and it was very nice to just be able to interact and talk to everyone.
Did anything surprise you about the production, or anything you didn't anticipate?
How quick it ended.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. Doing a play takes a lot of time.
Yes, it does.
You're a very busy woman. Between school and baby and everything you have in your life, why do you do things like this? How do you make time for it? Why do you make time for it?
The time was the harder part, but
Sure.
actually, I just want to do it to be able to open up my skills, because I know I'm not perfect by any means. So I want to build up my craft, and the only way I can do that is by putting myself in that actual position and doing it. And the time part was just always off. Like, I would come home at 9 o'clock and then be up till 1 in the morning doing homework, and then have to wake up at like 5 or 6 to go to class. So the time part, I mean, that was long gone.
Yeah, yeah.
Chloe, can you do 11 o'clock? This great estate of the mind, having its...
Yeah, Aristotle, and I know Plato, and I know Spinoza.
Good, then. 12 o'clock, Miss Gilroy? Gilmore. The Bible.
Difficult to remember.
10 o'clock, Allison. 9 o'clock, Spinoza. Ben?
Yes, sir. Your experience had taught me that the common occurrences...
Loud. And I saw
all the objects of my desire and care.
Why were they in masks? That was an approach for me. For one thing, if you notice, it gets really crowded in Act 1. So by putting all of the refugees in masks, it helps focus the attention on the actors without masks. That's one reason. I also, when we think about refugees and immigrants coming over the border and stuff, there is a tendency to lump them all together and to dehumanize them. And that was my attempt to kind of make them more of a huddled mass. That, it was hard to identify with what they were doing. It's even hard to understand Homer, singing like Bob Dylan. Things like that even made it, it's like it was really hard to identify with them because of those masks.
Mrs. Antrobus, Gladys, where are you? You can come out now. The war's over. You've heard all this already. Mr. Antrobus will be here this afternoon, etc., etc. He says now that the war's over, we'll all have to settle down and be perfect.
Challenges, Ethan? Any at all?
Well, I would say dinosaur, but what? No, but taking the time it does to fill it up and putting it on, there is timing issues that you have to figure out, and that's a part of the struggle. And then figuring out how to show expression, even though you can't really move your hands much or show expression on your face, which is one of the main keys in acting. So that's one of my struggles.
Yeah, I think the masks were very challenging for a lot of the performers. And in some ways, some of the most rewarding things came out of that. Kate, will you talk just for a second about the moment that you have with the fortune teller and the horse? Because that really evolved from what it first started as, when you didn't even have a mask.
Yeah. Before the mask, it was just kind of I was able to have a facial expression of, excuse me? Yeah. I don't understand why you're yelling cancer at me. And then all of that goes away because you can't see me. So I have to have that dramatic pause and turn and hold it as long as I can hold it without breaking character while I'm staring into Kit's eyes after she has yelled cancer and the audience is laughing at my horse. That used to be just a quick little pause and then laugh, and now has turned into the 15-second stare down.
No, is there something about that vague, vapid, just cold steel. It's like, and the audience is waiting. They're waiting. The tension. Yeah.
Everybody's been crossing me. Everybody, everything, all of you. I'm gonna be free. Even if I have to kill half the world for it.
Let me get my hands on his throat! I'll show him!
Don't play the scene. You know what happened last show. Stop the play. Last time you almost strangled him. Stop it!
I think that hands and arms are as important as making a choice that you're going to stick with as anything that you say. So if you are going to make a gesture, make it every time and make it part of the line, just as important as the words that you're saying.
And meaningful.
Yeah, and
commit
avoid
to
the
it. Yeah, don't
avoid the fidget. You know, fidgeting is easy because if you think about it, when you're sitting at home and you're doing stuff, right? I mean, and my age, we didn't have fidget toys. I talk to my daughter all the time, and she's got fidget stuff. She's got little things she clicks, and she's got things she moves around. And me, a fidget toy for me was taking my pen apart in high school and putting it back together again. I mean, so it's easy. We sit around and we fidget, we move our hands around, and it's really easy to talk like this. And so when you're on stage, you have to figure out, A, is it appropriate for that character? And then B, how can I not do that? And like she said, how do you make that movement mean something?
You see, and I'm sure you saw a lot of meaningful movement in this show. One of my favorite gestures in the show that just says volumes is in Act 3 when they're making the table and Moira slams the table, strong gesture, and then talks to Sabina and then immediately goes back into sitcom character. And it's clear. It's just clear, and it's all action driven. It's all hand driven.
I know that every good and excellent thing stands minute by minute on the razor edge of danger and must be fought for. Whether it's a field or a home or a country. Maggie, you and I must remember in the days of peacetime all those resolves that were so clear to us in the times of war. Maggie, we've come a long way.
We have learned. We're learning.
Yes. And the steps of our journey are marked here for us.
I know one of the reasons I got into acting as a child is because I didn't want to be me. I wanted to be something else, somebody else. And that was the appeal to me, almost like it was a mask, And this is one of those shows where you play the mask, but you also have to play yourself to some degree. Even though you guys played actors, they were based on something within your own psyche. So it's very interesting in that same way, especially you few people in the show that played yourself.
Yeah.
The turned up to 11 version, yeah.
After experience had taught me that the common occurrences of daily life are vain and futile,
and I saw that all the objects of my desire and fear were in themselves nothing good nor bad, save insofar as the mind
How
was
will a man
affected.
choose the
I
ruler
at length
that shall
determined
rule
to
over
search out
him?
whether there was
Will he
something
not choose a man who has first established order in himself,
Aristotle
knowing
and
that any decision that has its spring from anger or pride, this reveals confusion.
Good night, new day begins.
But God has always created us as wonderful, and the earth was wasted void,
and the darkness fell upon the face of the deep, and the Lord said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Tell us who you are, what you do, and what you did with the show.
Okay. I'm Parker Thompson, and I was production manager for The Skin of Our Teeth. So basically, I dealt a lot with the schedule and the communication between you, the director, and the actors, as well as in the script, marking down blocking, doing line notes for them, making sure they're staying on track with their lines, and throughout the show, the actual show, I called the show. So I did all the cues. Jeff, go. Ron, go. So whoever was doing the sound effects or the projection or the rails, I make sure they were getting on time and where you wanted it to be with the show.
And like one of the things you just said, Parker, was that you communicated between me and the actors. Why can't I just do that? Why can't the director just do that?
I feel like most of the time in a show, this is coming from an actor's standpoint from the shows I've done, it's very, very intimidating sometimes with a director because they can be the higher person in the room, I guess. So it's kind of intimidating talking to the director sometimes with just certain things. So I feel like having the production manager there, being as kind of a buffer, yeah. Okay. It just kind of it eases the process a little bit, I think.
As the production manager for this, and you've kind of done a lot of things you didn't just jump into production managing.
No.
What kind of things have you done to prepare yourself to get ready for this, and why did you take on this challenge?
Well, I started off with I think it was the second Sherlock. I came on as assistant production manager to help out Grace, who was the production manager, and to learn a bit from that side of theater. I had done a little bit of tech before, but it was mainly just, I did the lights for the first Sherlock, but didn't design them or anything. I just clicked
Hit
go.
the buttons, yeah.
Clicked go and back whenever I needed to. I had maybe pulled rails a few times. But so I wanted to learn like more of the management side, I guess, of theater. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot from Grace, even though it was only Grace's second time doing it. She was fantastic. So I helped throughout the rest of the Sherlocks. And prior to this show, I had a big conversation with you and Paige at the PAC, and just because I wanted to be, or I thought I wanted to be assistant director, to learn more of the director side of that. Because I've been assistant director at North Hardin for Beauty and the Beast, and now for Cinderella. So I wanted to get a different director's view. So we had a big, long conversation about what I wanted to gain from this, what I wanted to see, what I wanted to learn. And so we decided that it was best if I took on the role as production manager. And, I was right there next to you constantly and learned that way.
What has been the most challenging part of this?
The most challenging part was probably calling the show.
Weren't you glad you were at every rehearsal?
Yes.
At that point?
Yes.
At that point, it made sense for you to be there and you hear everybody, the rhythms of the scenes, and go, splash, and thunder.
Yes.
Bingo. All of those cues kind of ingrained in you at that point.
Yeah. I mean, there were several times when people were backstage and just like, they would make a joke or something and say a line, and in my head I'd be like, canned laughter. Thunder. Okay, got it. And it was all almost ingrained in my mind. There were some parts where I was like, okay, I've really got to focus now because I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in these next 5 minutes. Especially towards the end of the acts was probably the most difficult part for me, figuring out when the projection and the lights and the blackout and the next projection to start, and not to confuse the actors and the thunder, and how long to keep the lights up so the audience can see, but not too long. That part was probably the most difficult part for me.
What was the most rewarding?
Most rewarding? Honestly, the entire experience was very rewarding. I feel very, very blessed to be able to take on this role. I learned a lot from it. Probably just being able to learn how to communicate with people older than me.
What surprised you? What did you not anticipate?
I honestly did not expect calling the show to be quite so difficult.
Really?
Yes. In my head, I was like, okay, I can do this. It's not the most challenging thing in the world. It's a new thing, so it's going to be a little challenging to take on and figure out, but it's not going to be very hard. I was wrong. There were a lot of sound cues, not very many light cues, thankfully. Paige and Aaron saved me there, but a lot of sound cues, quite a bit of projection. Not a whole lot, but they were in difficult places sometimes.
And stuff that is essential, we talked about earlier, but hopefully unnoticed by the audience.
Yeah.
Subtle.
Yes.
And that's tricky.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I always pay attention to whenever I go to see a show is the technical side of it. I'm like, okay, these lights look great, first of all. Oh, that projection, and okay. I tend to pay attention a lot toward the technical side. I wouldn't say more than the actors, but more equal grounds than most people. So I know that's one thing that maybe I'm not sure who to bring up, but someone else like me who would come to see the show that is like, okay, that seemed a little off.
But can't pinpoint why.
Yeah. So it's,
I want to talk about one particular sound cue. Because I think it's interesting in the grander scope of things. Talk a little bit about the thunder and the lightning in Act 2.
Well, the thunder and the lightning,
Well, let's say thunder, lightning, and projection weather signal in Act 2.
Yeah, when it all fit together, it looked great. But they had to all go at the same time to make sense.
And what was the purpose behind this?
The purpose behind
all of that happening?
It was to kind of push and progress the act faster and faster until it built and exploded, basically. So yeah, the thunder, the lights, and the projection all going at the same time to make sure it really showed that a big storm was coming. So yeah, I would usually give them, a few lines: standby, lights, projection, and sound to all go at the same time. Okay, so it gets to that part, all go, and even if one person is slightly behind and slightly just hesitates, yeah, which rightfully so, it's a scary thing to do. It could all just not look the greatest. So it's really hard making sure you are very precise with your calling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I struggled a couple times with that. Like turn. Oh yeah, you go. You win. Sorry, that was my fault. Yep, that was my fault. But yeah, so those three cues all fitting together. Really, like every time it happened, it just progressed and progressed the show more and more.
Oh, 6 o'clock and Mr. A's not home yet? Not that I'm surprised. The whole world's at 6s and 7s, and why the house hasn't fallen down about our ears long ago is a miracle to me. This is where you came in. The end of this play isn't written yet. You go home. No? Mr. and Mrs. Antrobus. Oh, their heads are full of plans, and they're as confident as the first day they began. And they told me to tell you. Good night.
Every time our world has come apart, you were safe inside my heart.